If you haven't seen the previous episodes, please check out the other videos on the channel first. Taehyung's legs gave out, and he collapsed into his seat as soon as Jungkook left. The thought that he had been rescued this morning was nothing more than a delusion. The harsh realization that dramas and movies are all fiction struck Taehyung hard, and the only thing he could see was Seokyeon rushing over to him from afar. Taehyung had 2 days off every week, and today was one of them. Even though he had a new job, his routine of staying at home on his days off hadn't changed. But something was different. He had started studying fashion. Yet that didn't seem to apply to him, especially on days like today, when his mood was at its worst. Sigh, the incident with Jungkook from the other day still wouldn't leave his mind. Even though it was entirely his own fault, the fact that the suit his mother had saved up for, hoping he wouldn't lose confidence, was disregarded, made his mood even worse. Lying still under his blanket, staring blankly at the ceiling, Taehyung's phone rang. Bzzz, bzzz. The phone kept vibrating, but Taehyung, not wanting to answer, pulled the blanket over his head. The long vibrations went off 2 or 3 more times before finally stopping. Then, a short buzz rang out again. Taehyung, pulling his worn-out flip phone open, checked the message he had just received. The sender was his mom. Taehyung, did you move? There was someone else at your place. I wanted to bring you some kimchi. It was a typical message from his mom. Tears welled up in Taehyung's eyes. His parents still didn't know that their son was living such a shabby life. After being accepted as an intern and moving to Seoul to live on his own, Taehyung didn't see his parents often. But just a few years ago, his mom used to bring him side dishes to his old studio apartment, until Taehyung moved to a tiny one-room place and begged her not to come. It was his pride. He didn't want them to see how far he'd fallen. I'm hungry. Taehyung, lying under his blanket, heard his stomach growl and checked the time. The clock showed exactly 3 p.m. He opened the cupboard, hoping to find a pack of ramen, but even that was gone. His shoulders slumped in disappointment. Damn it. I'm broke too. In the end, he decided to go out for food. He threw on a thin padded jacket, and the cold wind brushed against the back of his neck. Shivering in the chilly air, Taehyung pulled his neck in like a turtle. He walked to his regular spot, a small, run-down restaurant that was always crowded because of its reputation. It was the place Taehyung went to whenever he didn't have money but still wanted to feel the noisy atmosphere, like a refuge. The owner recognized him and greeted him with a soft, motherly smile. Hey there, student. Hello. It's cold. Sit by the heater over there. Thank you. Taehyung sat down and fished out a 5,001 bill from his pocket. It was just enough for a bowl of soup. Relieved that he hadn't checked his balance before coming, Taehyung called out to the owner, "Can I get a bowl of soup, please?" "Sure. It'll be ready in a minute." After that brief conversation, silence settled around Taehyung again. The restaurant was bustling with families having meals together, couples, or friends hanging out. Despite the crowded scene, Taehyung was the only one sitting alone, and he lowered his head, feeling a bit embarrassed. The bell on the door rang again, and a new customer entered, sitting at the table next to him. Taehyung glanced over briefly, noticing that the man was also alone. A strange sense of camaraderie washed over him, and a small, bitter smile appeared on his lips. Soon after, the steaming bowl of soup arrived. Taehyung blew on it, took a bite, and closed his eyes. The taste reminded him of his mother's cooking. The soup was very similar to the stew she used to make for days with a handful of greens. It was why Taehyung liked this place. He finished the bowl without leaving a single grain of rice, and as he stood up to leave, something strange happened. The man at the table next to him stood up at the exact same time. Their eyes met. Both froze in place as their expressions stiffened. The man sitting next to Taehyung, eating the same soup, was none other than Jungkook. Unlike the neat and formal image from the department store, he was dressed casually. Still in disbelief, Taehyung, out of habit, bowed slightly and greeted him. hello. Jungkook, who had humiliated Taeyong so thoroughly, didn't even respond. Yet, instinctively, Taeyong couldn't straighten his back. I'll pay for both. Jungkook ignored Taeyong completely and went to the counter, taking out a 10,000 won bill. Watching Jungkook from a distance, Taeyong bit his lip. What an obnoxious guy, thank you for the meal. Jungkook smiled warmly at the restaurant owner, in contrast to how he had treated Taeyong. It was irritating, but Taeyong knew he couldn't do anything about it. This was the reality of being the weaker party. Quietly, he rummaged through his pockets. It wasn't there. He checked every pocket in his jacket and pants, but the 5,001 bill was nowhere to be found. His eyes widened in panic, and he turned pale. It was there just a moment ago. He frantically searched his seat, but there was no sign of the money. Meanwhile, Jungkook had already finished paying and was about to leave the restaurant. In desperation, Taeyong reached out and grabbed the hem of Jungkook's jacket, his voice trembling. Excuse me. Jungkook, who had been about to leave, looked down at Taeyong's hand clutching his jacket, then at Taeyong's face. His expression was unreadable. I lost my money. Could I borrow 5,000 won? There was no one more pathetic than him at that moment. Of all people, he had to ask this smug jerk for help. But Taeyong had no choice but to swallow his pride and ask. The shame weighed heavily on him. Jungkook's expression softened slightly before he pulled out his wallet from inside his coat and handed the owner another 5,000 won. Please take care of his bill too, he said indifferently. Sigh. Kim Taeyong. You thought you'd finally become a proper person after finding a new job, but here you are, humiliated again. With a flushed face, Taeyong bowed deeply and followed Jungkook out of the restaurant. As Jungkook opened his car door and sat in the driver's seat, Taeyong managed to mutter a few words. I'm really sorry, and thank you. I'll pay you back, I promise. Taeyong stood with his head down, fidgeting with his fingers. Jungkook glanced at him briefly, then got into his car without a word and drove off. Not a single response. It made Taeyong resent him, but at the same time, he couldn't help but feel a creeping sense of gratitude.